The war in the Middle East has expanded even further, and this could become a catastrophe for the whole world, although for the first time I can say Trump said Trump did. Remember, on Tuesday he threatened live on Fox News that next week, quote, "We will knock out all their power plants, we will knock out all their bridges if they don't come to the negotiating table." So he didn't wait for next week. And last night, on the 6th night of strikes in a row, US aircraft bombed bridges in southern Iran, both road and rail, cutting off the country's main port, Bandar Abbas, from the roads to Tehran. And for the first time during the entire war, Iran acknowledged strikes on its energy infrastructure. The Ministry of Energy literally pleaded with residents of Iran's southern provinces to save energy. The Electricity Committee, although the US does not report on strikes against the energy sector, and Tehran responded to all of this in a way it never has before. Missiles were launched at 7 countries at once, and for the first time, Syria came under attack. But behind the scenes, the most frightening thing is happening. Iran has already ordered the Yemeni Houthis to prepare to close the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait in the Red Sea. The missiles are already deployed and the group is just waiting for the order. In this episode, you'll get the full picture of the escalation over the past 48 hours. Statements from both sides verbatim, personal threats against Donald Trump from Iran, and a sober answer to the question of where all this is heading. My name is Alexi Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're approaching 300,000 subscribers and I will be personally grateful for your subscription. So let's start with the American strikes, because last night the US took things to a new level. Look at the logic behind the targets. Last night the US bombed bridges in the Hormozgan province. The strikes hit the city of Bandar Kamir on the coast of the Strait of Hormuz. And here's the key detail. The strikes on the road and railway bridges seem to be aimed at cutting off Bandar Abbas, which is Iran's main port, from the roads leading to the central regions of the country and further to Tehran. Other routes are still open for now, but American strikes could expand, potentially disrupting both the movement of military cargo and the supply of goods to Iran's 90 million people. In some ways, by the way, this is reminiscent of the tactics used by the Ukrainian defense forces, who specifically target Russian logistics in the rear. The essence of the strategy of the United States right now is this: America has started to cut Iran into pieces, logistically speaking. They are not bombing factories or radars, but specifically cutting off, for example, the main port of the country from the capital, cutting off logistics. So, okay, some goods might be able to enter this port, but after that, it's simply impossible to deliver them further because the bridges have been destroyed. This is already a war against the country's infrastructure as such. Plus, that same night after the strike, the control tower in the port of Chabahar on the coast of the Gulf of Oman exploded. Plus damaged airport infrastructure, telecommunications networks, and railways. And here, the head of the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth, couldn't resist and even personally posted a photo of the collapsing Chabahar tower on social media. And he did it proudly, like a trophy. Look, we destroyed a civilian control tower that manages that very port. But in Tehran, they're signaling something different. The most important point is even more significant than all the destroyed bridges. Iran has acknowledged attacks on energy infrastructure for the first time, although the Americans are still silent about it. The US Central Command hasn't made any statements about strikes on energy infrastructure. But today, Iran's Ministry of Energy addressed residents of the southern provinces, urging them to reduce electricity consumption. They explained that these regions are currently experiencing extreme heat and, importantly, attacks on energy infrastructure. And just imagine, the Iranian authorities, for example, are asking their citizens in the south to turn off air conditioners in 40-degree heat because supposedly power plants are being hit. According to Iranian data, American strikes have already killed more than 35 people and over 300 have been injured, and on Friday this number increased. Now the response from Iran, and last night it was unprecedentedly large scale. This only proves that each side is just expanding this war. According to reports on Friday morning, Bahrain, Iraq, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Jordan, and for the first time ever, even Syria, had to take defensive measures against Iranian missiles and drones. That means, notably, 7 countries were under attack from Iran in a single night. This is a clear expansion of the geographic scope of these strikes. The previous night, Jordan was attacked for the first time during this phase of escalation, and now Syria as well. Let's go over the main points. Qatar, and this is especially cynical because Doha has been a key mediator between Washington and Tehran throughout the war. Let me remind you that Doha was a hiding place, for example, for the leaders of the Hamas movement in the Gaza Strip. In general, Qatar has always been a kind of transit point for all these terrorists. The Ministry of Defense of Qatar reported intercepting a missile attack, and the country's Ministry of Internal Affairs reported that a child was injured. The child was hit by a fragment of the intercepted missile. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, meanwhile, reported the 15th wave of strikes on the American Al Udeid air base and claimed to have destroyed a long-range radar and several U.S. strategic refueling aircraft. If confirmed, this would be a major loss for the Americans. And in Jordan, the army reported intercepting 3 Iranian missiles. Bahrain. According to the statement from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran, American military facilities in Jufair have been attacked. And the bombshell tonight is Syria. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps stated that they attacked American forces at the Al-Tamf base in the southeast of Syria. They called it, quoting the Tasnim agency, retaliation for the deadly American strikes on Iran. By the way, this is the first direct Iranian strike specifically on Syrian territory during the entire war. And it's obvious that the geography of this war has spread to yet another country. Here, however, some informational confusion began, because Syrian military sources told AFP that there was actually no strike on Tanf at all. According to other reports, the Americans had already withdrawn their troops from this base earlier, at the beginning of 2026, so there was neither any damage nor any casualties. So, in other words, the Iranians may have carried out a triumphant strike on an empty base. But the political fact remains. Tehran has announced that it is now striking Syria as well. Tehran offers this justification for the whole campaign. It states that it is targeting American facilities in the region, insisting that Washington is using its bases in these countries as platforms for strikes against Iran, and the rhetoric is extremely tough. Next, I'll quote a statement from the Khatam al-Anbiya command. "We will not allow America, an external force from outside our region, to interfere in the affairs of the Hormuz Strait. If his latest threats, including attacks on Iranian infrastructure, are carried out, meaning Donald Trump, all infrastructure in the region will be destroyed by powerful strikes from Iranian forces." As you can hear, all the infrastructure of the region, this is a direct threat. Not to America, by the way, but to Dubai, Doha, Riyadh, and everyone else nearby. And today, explosions were heard again in Dubai. Moreover, the Iranian strikes damaged a power plant and a water desalination facility in Kuwait. In particular, the Ministry of Electricity, Water and Renewable Energy of Kuwait reported that, as a result of the Iranian strikes, a massive fire broke out at one of the power plants, which led to some of the power units going out of service and caused serious damage to the facility. The fire is out, authorities are preparing repairs, and they're asking people to conserve electricity for now. But most importantly, one of the water desalination plants was damaged by the shelling. Such plants provide 90% of the country's water supply needs. In other words, Iran has already started targeting critical infrastructure. But still, Iran hasn't played its last trump card yet, but it's definitely already pulled it from the deck. Reuters, citing 3 sources, specifically 2 high-ranking Iranian and 1 regional, writes, Iran has asked the Yemeni Houthi movement to be ready to close the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait, the gateway to the Red Sea, if the United States strikes Iranian energy infrastructure. Well, first of all, this is no longer just an idea scribbled on a napkin, as they say. According to the sources, Iran has already discussed this issue. It was discussed at the leadership level of the Islamic Republic of Iran and was conveyed to the Houthis. Secondly, everything is already prepared. A source close to the Houthis reported that the group has completed preparations for attacks on shipping, deploying missiles and drones near the strait on the Yemeni heights above Hodeidah and the Gulf of Aden, and is waiting for orders. And thirdly, most tellingly, the decision about exactly when to close the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait will be made by representatives of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran, who are already in Yemen. In other words, the Houthis don't control the switch, It's controlled by Iranian generals in Yemen. By the way, remember last week Saudi Arabia struck at the Sana'a airport to prevent the landing of a plane that was flying directly from Tehran, and it ended up landing in Hodeidah. So it's quite possible that those very representatives were on that flight, IRGC. What this means in practice, we discussed in previous episodes, but let me remind you of the numbers because they decide everything. The Strait of Hormuz has been closed since February. The only alternative route for Saudi Arabia is the east-west pipeline to the port of Yanbu. The port of Yanbu is on the Red Sea. Up to 75% of all Saudi oil shipments from there go directly through the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. So, if you close the second door, meaning the Hormuz Strait is closed, now only the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait remains. And then the largest oil exporter, Saudi Arabia, will have no way to reach its buyers at all. Yes, both straits will end up in Iran's grip. Well, any threat to the Red Sea risks drastically worsening the global energy crisis, and it really highlights how explosive this new phase of the war is. And now, try to put all these pieces together. Trump said on Tuesday that next week the US will start bombing Iran's power plants. Iran already announced on Thursday that if you strike the power plants, we will close the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. Thursday night, the US struck bridges, but it's unclear if the energy sector was targeted. In response, Iran has not yet closed the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait, but for the first time, it strikes Syria. And overall, attacking 7 countries at once is a clear sign that the Iranians definitely have missiles. Although, let me remind you, Donald Trump boasted that he had destroyed everything a long time ago. And it's also worth noting the personal threats to Donald Trump from the Iranian authorities. First of all, in downtown Tehran at the Islamic Revolution Square, on Wednesday there was a billboard showing Donald Trump lying in a coffin with the inscription, and I quote, "We killed Trump," meaning we will kill Trump. And then it gets even more personal. Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi, in a letter to the UN Security Council, writes, "All bases, all facilities and assets of hostile forces in the region should be considered legitimate military targets." All assets. The wording is vague, intentionally so, and it has a frightening precedent. In the March phase of the war, let me remind you, Iranian missiles and drones already struck Dubai. At that time, the Dubai Airport, Dubai Port, the Burj Al Arab Hotel, and the Fairmont Palm Hotel on that famous artificial palm in the sea were hit. Now think about whose skyscrapers, golf clubs, and branded towers are in that very Dubai and all over the Persian Gulf. Yes, that's Trump Organization, and today the Iranians have already publicly stated that if Trump doesn't stop, they are ready to start attacks specifically on Trump Organization properties in the Persian Gulf region. And they've even released a list of initial targets. By the way, even Dubai is already feeling the effects of these information waves. The authorities of the emirate today were forced to officially deny fake news about explosions in downtown and near those very Trump Organization properties, and threatened criminal charges for spreading such information. So panic itself is already a weapon, and Dubai had already emptied out during the first wave of attacks. It was deserted for a short time, so now, when they try to launch such waves of panic, it's once again an attempt to make people simply leave Dubai. Now let's talk about where all this is leading. Look at the structure that's taking shape. The temporary truce has completely collapsed. That's it, the memorandum has long been gone. The Hormuz Strait is closed by Iran. The US has imposed a counter-blockade on Iranian ports. And just last night, American military forces even boarded the Wen Yao tanker. And off the coast of Oman, another vessel was hit by Iran. Oil prices are gradually going up. Both sides have been striking each other for the 6th night in a row. And neither side is publicly signaling a willingness to return to the negotiating table. The escalation ladder from here looks frighteningly clear, step by step. The first step has already been taken tonight. The first step is bridges, logistics, and the first acknowledged strikes on energy infrastructure. So, once again, Iran claims that there have already been strikes on energy infrastructure. The Americans are keeping silent about this. The second step is exactly those large-scale strikes on power plants that Trump announced for next week. The third step is automatically an order from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to Yemen so that the Yemeni Houthis start closing the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. And at this third step, we will find ourselves in the most difficult situation. Right now we are still at the first step, but the US has already started to move on to the second. Is there a chance to get off this path? Yes, and you can see it too. Trump is still signaling diplomacy right now. Pakistan and Qatar continue to work as intermediaries. Even under Iranian missiles, Qatar still does not step out of its role as a negotiator and officially denies agreeing to military action against Iran. That is, Doha continues to be a diplomatic hub. Diplomatic channels remain open. The problem here is different. Both sides now firmly believe that just one more blow and the opponent will definitely break. Trump believes that bridges and power plants will force Tehran to give up the Hormuz Strait. And Tehran believes that the threat of closing the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait and the threat to Donald Trump's real estate will definitely make him back down. And when both players are sure that victory is just one strike away, but neither wants to stop. And now all attention is focused on two factors. Will Trump bomb Iranian power plants? And will Iran carry out its threat to close the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait? In fact, this is the main and final threat from both sides. And here I think we are approaching the climax of this war. Who, as they say, will blink first? I'll leave it at that. Share your thoughts and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peachy News. The link is in the description of this video. We post news there as it comes in. And if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.